About 2 months ago, I obtained 2 grams of DMT. I had settled on other tryptamines for the past 3 years, which had brought me a wealth of amazing experiences, but they only made me desire DMT even more. My package arrived one sunny April morning on my day off. I loaded my joint with a small dose of the white freebase powder and sparked it. I felt an immediate warm buzzing around my neck and shoulders, followed by the bite of the harsh smoke in my lungs. My vision gently morphed with fine horizontal seams, each band tinting reality either red, green, or blue in alternating order. Intuitively, I felt a sense of potential power and significance. Although as the experience quickly dissipated, I was strongly aware of the taste of plastic. 5 minutes later, a friend called who I hadn't heard of in years. I imagine this was just a moment of synchronicity. I've always been interested in the dream world that psychedelics can reveal. Though I don't believe in ghosts and demons, I still remain wary of those believers who abandon their lives to pursue the supernatural. When I'm under the influence of a psychedelic drug, at a sufficient dose, the dream state I occupy appears to have certain rules and parameters which are different to those of my lucid state. Of course, I can never define the term real when I'm tripping. In the afternoon, I bought a glass pipe with a little side hole and some vials from the local head shop. With this new equipment, I determined to explore further. I put some dry tobacco in the body of the pipe along with some spice and held it over a candle. I made several attempts like this with varying success. I often complicated the liftoff by worrying about the safety of the candle flame. I found music distracting. A singer's voice would morph into a metallic jabber. These first journeys were brief and hard to integrate. The rapidity of the visions was such that only the general tenor of the content was discernible. It seemed to have a sinister tone, consisting of images such as playing cards flashing by, skulls, military hardware, screws, and at one point, a vicious gun turret on the back of a plane with jutting machine barrels. The almost instant passing of this phase was followed by a warm, womb-like phase, where I didn't have any technicolor-like visions, just the warm reds of the bright ceiling light through my closed eyelids, with waves of brown folded and divided. I had experienced something like this before, so I felt very comfortable. I'd like to note that in this subjective state, I often feel like I am in the presence of a benevolent God, to whom I feel it is only right to thank for all the good things in life, and to send out good wishes to all my loved ones. Though I then feel a little guilty and send out good wishes to all the people I don't love. Finally, I feel very virtuous all around. However, when I'm back in my sober state, my skeptic brain has a good laugh at those religious epiphanies. But this is what I love about psychedelics. They let me experiment with possibilities which in the real world are not possibilities. For example, the question, what is it like to burst a sack of dimensions on your head? That is a subject of metaphysical speculation, but under the influence, you might be lucky enough to participate in some kind of encounter where this actually happens. I often found myself swaying gently with my arms folded, and a warm smile upon my face, almost bowing to the universe with a satisfied bliss. I took one hit in the kitchen, overlooking my back garden with its many pleasant trees, some still in blossom. The good sunshine that evening gave the foliage a translucent light. In the kitchen, I heated the pipe over the gas. The disadvantage of my method seemed to be that it led to quite some waste. I needed to cover the side hole of the pipe to achieve a stronger negative pressure, which results in a more effective vaporization. However, the pipe became too hot to touch, and so again I was approaching the jump with a cluttered mind state. I managed 2 tokes, holding the last one in. I kept my eyes open, holding steady on the kitchen units while seated on a tall stool. The surge began and I watched the kitchen units dance before my very eyes, sliding all over the place in outline form. They soon morphed into neon-colored orbs of red, blue, and green. Then I looked at the microwave on the work surface, who was also indulging in these strange displays. Immediately, I beheld the sudden exchange of pulses of neon energy between the microwave and the gas cooker. At this point, I had to laugh. I had a sense that this performance was for my benefit somehow. There had been some comedic element which had struck a chord in me, and it all just seemed absolutely hilarious. I remember thinking to myself that, wow, what if my wife walked in while I was witnessing this? I would just have to say, would you look at that? I began to surmise that my technique was probably flawed and wasteful. The pipe became quite grubby. I didn't want to wash away the remnants of the previous burn, and I was getting toward the end of my spice as well. In the knowledge of almost certain replenishment, I decided to purchase a more effective pipe and make the best of what I had left. I found a light bulb style vaporizer for under $5 from the head shop. I tested this vaporizer in the kitchen over a gas. I was a little apprehensive because I had been chewing over the sinister vision of my previous experience. I wondered that it was just the thin end of the wedge, and by inhaling more, I was only going to submerge deeper into something sinister that I didn't want to see. I could not reconcile this fear with the wonderful, blissful sense of being I was experiencing in the afterglow. I wondered if it was some part of myself that I was generally scared to look at. The voice of logic reminded me that whatever happens is over almost as quickly as it begins, and that gave me the strength to go on. The heat melted the light yellow tinted crystals into a colorless pool which gathered in the bottom of the bulb. I watched white vapor uncoiling around the glass. I drew in one long, potent lungful, and as I did, the vapor billowed furiously. My tongue and lips numbed, and my respiratory plumbing stung as little as I filled up. Eyes opened, I placed the still billowing bulb down on a cold hob and turned the heat off. As I did this, the room became a tinted yellow sepia, and I shut my eyes to look for a slideshow. I was immediately disappointed. Just the womb-like state with some extra padding, but then the warm crescendo of buzzing, both audible and physical, spread through my neck and shoulders, followed by a very loud crack or snap from somewhere in my auditory canal. For a short while, I was strictly local. I can't recall all the events, but there was a sensation of being somewhere in between my kitchen and the dream world. Then my absence of self was destroyed by a vivid vision. It was like a view through a tiny hole in the wall of a darkened room out onto a mystical landscape on a bright summer day. I thought I saw snippets of rows of parked cars or something with their chromed wings, or maybe it was just an orderly residential scene. I gasped involuntarily, startled by the many implications of this vision. The stylistic appearance of the scenes were partly culturally familiar, and at the same time slightly skewed. I was startled out of the phase with the vision, but I was also exhilarated. I then returned to the afterglow, where I began giving praise to the universe for what I could only formulate as the privilege of what I had seen. The question of intentionality came up again in my mind. I felt like I had been shown these things by the big whatever. I gently swayed on the stool and basked in a beautiful concept that the universe was far more bizarre and comedic than I could ever imagine. I had gasped at the ontological ramification that I might have seen another world or a parallel universe. I felt certain for a few moments that I had seen proof that there were many worlds out there, all sharing certain similar evolutionary environmental parameters. The general effect of all this DMT smoking has been strangely positive. I am conscious of the power of suggestion in potentially shaping the experiences we have. After all, aren't we just the sum of our memories and experiences? I felt almost virtuous to not have witnessed entities which could be described as self-transforming machine elves, though that isn't to say I was in any position to doubt the subjective truth of these descriptions. But I had felt what seemed to be divine presence, visualized abstract entities in the wide mind space of closed eyes with a strong light source. And I had witnessed something that had startled me to the core of my existence in a satisfying way. Although I could not fathom the significance, it could have been many possible or impossible things. I also noticed a sense of well-being in general life, which I have heard reported and subsequently may be a result of preconditioning. I found a part of me thinking that everyone should have a blast with this stuff at least once. A cliche, I know. I also imagine the possibility of a worldwide pyramid selling scheme by which an alien race might prepare humanity for contact. This tickled me, since in my newfound openness to the parameters of altered space, such a conspiracy might be impossible to disprove. I felt heightened empathy with even the people I perhaps disliked, and a tangible antidepressant effect. Not that I am generally depressive these days, but there was something to this. I would only complain that my chest has been taking a beating. There's a strange logic that it appears that the more effective hit I achieve, the less troublesome my chest feels. I cough up some chunks in the aftermath, but the taste doesn't offend me anymore. My next consignment arrived a week after the final excursion. Excitement boiling over, I prepared myself for more adventures. However, I was faced with a dilemma. The experience, I felt honestly in my heart, was a good thing, as far as I could see. It seemed to open my mind on a spiritual level which chimed morally with the Buddhist ideas I had been reading about recently. It gave me exhilarating journeys and imaginings which I somehow wished I could record or describe. I also sensed somehow that the experiences constituted a revealing or uncovering due to the perception of continuity between trips. In other words, something that might be captured in my memory in one experience, I might seek to hone in that image on another experience, and it might actually blossom itself into many possibilities. It was an ongoing discourse between me and the drug. However, it is expensive to obtain and woefully illegal. I just can't see how it would become legal like tobacco or booze. It's just too powerful. I was pretty scared by what seemed to be hellish images in the early part of my experiences, and it almost seemed to be warning me off. I don't like to break the law. I only do so in relation to cannabis and my research. I don't speed, and I am morally at peace with myself most of the time. I had been reading about Alan Watts, a religious academic and Buddhist, who at one point said, "When you have got the message, hang up the phone." I agreed with these words, but certain that I had not yet got the message. I certainly wanted to see more. With this in mind, I decided to explore the current 2 grams I had and order 5 more, which I would package and freeze with the other samples for some distant future time when I felt the urge. I had a hunch that this drug wouldn't be available for too long, so I took up the opportunity. I had bought a gas turbo lighter to provide a safe but effective heat source. I know that if for whatever reason I let go of it, it will go out by itself, so the possibility of dying from burns while on the brink of universal knowledge is avoided. Furthermore, it starts the vaporization very quickly, and you can reduce the heat if your throat is hurting by increasing the flame distance. So, I got comfy on a very soft chair in my converted garage. I had strong spotlights on the ceiling pointed to my head. These help embolden the colors of the closed eye visuals, giving garish hues to the visual field. I loaded a 100 milligram hit and started the flame, beginning to inhale slowly once the vapors rose. I must have managed a long, cool, and slow hit because I was able to calmly hold it in for what seemed like a very long time. I was able to dispose of the light bulb and the lighter in a civilized fashion and close my eyes expectantly. Myself was dissolved again after a short cavalcade of pageantry and carnival, of which I was no longer fearful. But I was again non-local and in some kind of dimensional interstices. To the right of my mind, space was a blue mass, a large entity formed of layers of strata and bejeweled with many crystals along geometric fault lines, which folded, twisted, and morphed its form in a mechanical fashion. It floated alongside me. The blue color was around the entity like an amniotic sac. I moved my mind towards it and I burst into the sac, which fell away enough for the entity and myself to make some kind of contact. It was a light green to yellow color underneath the sack. In utter disbelief, I sensed a blue sheen spreading over my body, which was rigid but gently juddering with a fine tremor. I also became aware that I was pulsing and stretching rhythmically besides the fine tremor, matching the oscillations of the entity to my right. When I did so in phase with it, the space between the strata of its wrestling form widened, and the jewels inside showed me even more vivid crystal surfaces. It was through these surfaces that I was able to glimpse into the strange world what I had seen in my previous trip. The more my body matched the entity's dance, the greater these crystals' windows became, filling my mind's eye and almost breaking through into the scene. I saw a sunny suburban street somewhere far across the universe. This phase of physical movement and intense vision was accompanied by a strange sensation of flashes of sudden coldness, which intuition told me was something to do with the interacting of the entity. Although I did not fear for my life or any extreme drama, it was enough to distract me, and the consciousness of my visitor was diminished. I was still in the far-off state and spent some minutes swaying and basking in the moments of grace. My eyes remained closed, though I occasionally flashed a look at the room which sparked neon lights. To integrate this experience, I resolved to wrap up warm for my next attempt, and follow the dance of the entity if I dared. I had begun to entertain the possibility that the entity might be in fact using my curiosity to lure me into contact. There might be no doorways into other universes, just beings using extensive simulations of such worlds to lure psychonauts such as myself to their own mysterious ends. This might explain the slightly skewed stylistic tone of the visions. I also had to acknowledge there was almost a sexual angle to these encounters, a feature that I had noted on several occasions when I had used heroic doses of DMT. I also became aware of how much dancing plays a part of the shamanic phenomenon. Using what I had learned, I was able to reproduce a very similar experience. The dance lasted longer this time, and I preserved the cold spells, so that I got a clearer view of one of the crystals I decided to lock into. I noticed that all the other crystals featured a similar scene, which might have been slightly different, like cinema film stock or parallel dimensions. I couldn't tell, since I could only look closely through one crystal at a time. The entity itself is hard to describe in great detail. It had something akin to like an Inca or Aztec, combined with the opulence of a wedding cake, except that it could rotate, twist, and shuffle like a Rubik's Cube. In this latter trip, I noticed a neon green amniotic sac again, along with the original blue one I was familiar with. As I returned to consensus reality, I sent my now habitual prayers out and wished all souls well. I decided to hang up the phone for a while until I had been able to record and describe some of what I had been able to experience. There was still much I wanted to try, and I had still not gone for the infamous third toke. I had grudgingly come to understand the term self-transforming machine elves with greater intimacy. I have been amazed by how this drug is so specific and unspecific at the same time, and how difficult the game of memory can be when the recollection of what occurred evaporates like a dream at awakening. This stuff is both humbling and exalting. It shows me how little I really know about the universe in reality, but gives me a sense of joy at the small part I play in. And it seems to do this with its tongue and its cheek, for which it seems a reassuring and hopeful thing to my mind.